Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We must have a good speaker here today or something. This is like record, I think. So it's great to have you here. And welcome to Primetime. This is actually our last one of the year now, too. Primetime does celebrate beyond the classroom of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. It's a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. If you enjoy the Primetime programming, please consider becoming a member of the Friends of the Library. You can find out more information about the Friends, as well as archived recordings and past Primetime presentations on the library website. Today we welcome Dr. Claudia May, Associate Professor, Program Director of Reconciliation Studies. Let's give her a hand. Today she'll be sharing the inspiration behind her new children's book, When I Fly with Papa, and discusses why experiencing emotional freedom with God is so important to the practice of reconciliation. Let's give her another welcome.
I seriously want to cry, that is for sure. I've got alums over there, my sissy, my dean, my chair, my mom's sister. I mean, it's just too much. It's too much, too much, too much. Okay, so how long do I have? I just want to be a good steward of time.
12:05.
How much?
To 12:05.
Up to 12:05.
But there's this clock on the wall over there.
Okay, great. Okay. Well, thank you for coming. I'm deeply humbled by your presence. This has been a journey for about 2 years, actually. And it's a real passion for me, how we can experience emotional freedom with God. I have a lot to thank our students for this book. Many students know that I have a basket with tissue boxes in my office. A lot of crying happens in my office, partly because I give my students too much work in reading. Don't laugh too hard, you students. I haven't finished grading your papers yet, but the bottom line is that I have had the privilege of really being invited into some sacred spaces, some sacred stories while I've been here. But some students, you have enough students that come into your office and they say, they start to cry, and then they apologize for crying. And I asked them, why do you apologize for crying when it's so human? And that really concerned me, that there was a numbing of emotions that students were experiencing, and I'm seeing this go beyond Bethel. But I just feel like, wow, if we as Christians feel like we have to numb our emotions with others, with each other, and then how does that translate with God, right? And what are we teaching our students, our kids? How are we modeling out being emotionally free? So I decided to call this book When I Fly with Papa. And I'm going to start with what can a 7-year-old black girl teach us about emotional freedom. And I want to introduce you to my beloved Winnie. Give Winnie a clap. Winnie is a 7-year-old black girl. She is free. She is free to be herself with a God she calls Papa. Now let me give you a bit of a caveat here. Winnie calls God Papa, but you can call Papa what you feel you need to call Papa. Okay? She is free to be herself with this God that she calls Papa. As you can see, she's gorgeous. She has beautiful chocolate skin which shines. She is smart, she is funny, she is wise. She is not always likable, but the God she calls Papa loves her anyway. She's not Supergirl. Those of you who know that the work of Dr. Shaniqua Walker-Barnes, who wrote the book Too Heavy a Yoke, Black Women and the Burden of Strength. This is a book that really deals with the pressures that black women shoulder for being strong all the time. And I wanted Winnie to be liberated from that sense of always having to be strong, always having to serve others, care for others. And so I don't want to make Winnie a Supergirl. I want her to be fully human. So she doesn't always say the right things, the so-called right things, when she talks to Papa. She does not self-edit her thoughts or emotions. Let me say that again. She does not self-edit her thoughts or emotions. She does not have to hide from the God who does not hide from her. Winnie is beautifully flawed. She is not perfect. She can be silly. She experienced a range of emotions that are, after all, created by God. She does not apologize for feeling what she feels. Let me say that again. She does not apologize for feeling what she feels. She is fully human, gloriously so. For those of students, especially my European American women students who I've shared this with, and we're going to deal with this in the fall. I asked some of the students, and some faculty members, were you raised to perform happiness? Were you raised to perform happiness? And so I engage with that here because Winnie, and when I say, were you raised to perform happiness, whatever emotion you feel, especially if it's anger or sadness, there will be people around you who will try to either shut that down or connect their sense of well-being with your apparent happiness. And so what can happen is that there are many European American women that have been raised to perform how they feel or don't feel for the benefit of others. We're going to go more deeply into that. So I put this in my book. Winnie does not have to smile. She does not have to be nice. Come on, freedom from Minnesotans, come on now. Okay? She does not have to look cute. Can I get a click? Okay? She can be grumpy. She can sulk. She can be annoyed. She can be angry. It was important for me to include this for Winnie and not line up anger with her as a black girl. My wonderful student, she's double major at Taz, gave a wonderful presentation at HECUA and gave us data about how many black girls are suspended from school. It's a high proportion. And there's a lot to work with there. I have a lot of theories around that. But one of the things I didn't want to do is tell you why Winnie feels the way she does. I didn't want Winnie to be fixed to a particular emotion, to a particular circumstance. Does that make sense? I didn't want her to be pigeonholed to the angry black girl that would grow up to be perceived as the angry black woman, right? So I wanted her to be free, to not limit what she associates her feelings with, what experience she associates her feelings with. I also wanted to emphasize partnership. Winnie co-cultivates a beautifully humane relationship with God. This is a mutual relationship. God does not force himself on her. She chooses this. She chooses how she engages with this God. I also thought it was important to create a character that's is not always courageous. We have to be able to allow ourselves and children to be afraid, to not be courageous. She is free to feel. She is free to feel with God. She is free to feel loved by the Creator of God. I liken God's love to the wind. The wind cannot be controlled. The wind does not seek our permission to move. The wind cannot be pinned down or caged. The wind cannot be caught. God's love does not follow our dictates. And yet, I think it's important to stress that Winnie can choose to engage with this God's love. And the God doesn't say to her, you can't speak to me in this way. If anybody wants biblical example of that, think about Martha, who as she encounters this Jesus and tells him what to do, he doesn't say to her, don't tell me what to do. Do you not realize I'm a man? Do you not realize I'm a rabbi, a teacher? There is a freedom that she has when she approaches Jesus, and I wanted her to have that same kind of freedom. Winnie has a lot of reflections. She's a wanderer, a thinker, a seeker. She sees so much. How many of you have been in awe of how the trees turn green almost like overnight? How many of you have just thought, but it started like a little bud that was like it poked its green tongue out in a sense of outrageous love. And yet, when did it happen that the trees became in full bloom? How did that happen? That's the kind of wonderment that can, and the beauty that can sustain us, even when our lives are busy, consumed by fear, consumed by insecurities and shortcomings. Nature can be a great teacher to teach us how to take the time to step back and be in awe and be in wonder. This is some of her reflections. When we look at ourselves through Papa's eyes, we see love. For those of us who are almost glued to our phones, what do we see about ourselves when we preoccupy ourselves with this technology? I'm not anti-technology, don't get me wrong. But what do you see about yourself when you look at yourself through certain lenses? So for Winnie, when we look at ourselves through Papa's eyes, we see love. Another one is Papa cries with us. That sense of a Papa that's not emotionally disassociated, but deeply connected, deeply empathetic. Papa turns our worries into rainbows, a creative way of thinking that worries don't have to last always. To be loved by Papa is to be known. To be known by Papa is to be loved. This is so interconnected. What Winnie teaches us is that the God of love wants us to know that there is no shame in being known, warts and all. What if we were to be free to say, to share our insecurities rather than to hide behind the facade of perfectionism, having it together? How many of us say, when somebody asks us, are you okay? And we say, yes, when actually that's not true. Let's take this a bit further. To what extent do we live a life of lies and deception, partly because of socialization, partly because of the way we place other people's approval before cultivating this relationship with God? Have you ever shared a story with somebody, a sacred story, a private story, a hard story with somebody, and felt heard and seen and valued? Do you remember what that was like? To be heard and seen and valued and not judged, not dismissed, not condemned, not seen as not being the quote-unquote good Christian, if such a thing exists. Winnie dances with her shadow. She is gloriously free in this regard. And I love the way she just loves to move her body. This is something we all could learn here at Bethel. Okay? so moving your body. I have to say, Professor Adam Johnson went to my hip hop and spoken word class, and he did that. Okay. So, I just told him, just do a shuffle like this, just do this. And he did so. He was obedient. Okay. And this is Bear Bear. Yes, a very unique name, Bear Bear. But Bear Bear is Winnie's companion. Winnie can be mad at God. She does not hold back her anger towards God. She shouts at God. Anybody goes, oh, that's just too much. Okay, think about how the Canaanite woman shouted at Jesus. And think about how she didn't go to the religious leaders, anybody, the men, the wall of men that were in that space. She shouted at Jesus. The disciples are so arrogant. They complain that she's shouting at them. She's shouting at us. No, she shouted at Jesus. There's a difference. And the reality is, and there's not a behavior modification of how she is supposed to relate to Jesus. And so I've been very concerned about this whole notion of behavior management. How we become a faith that is so fixated on behavior management that we've lost the sight of the importance of having a relationship, being present to each other's sacred presence. So she is free to be angry with God. Again, we don't know the reasons behind her anger, and she doesn't have to justify it to us. One of the things I say is that God is not a gossip. We can share whatever we are experiencing with God, and He's not going to shut us down. So it was important for me to embrace that without fixating her to the notion that a black girl is always angry, right? She can also be goofy, okay? And so in this, you'll see when you read the book, she is mooing like a cow. She is quacking like a duck. And so we created a new word, didn't we, Anthony? Like, we just believe in that. Moo quack. So she moo quacks, okay? And we don't know, I mean, she can be that silly, and God and Winnie laugh together. God doesn't laugh at her. They laugh with one another. She can also be sad. And Winnie's sadness, again, we don't know why she's sad, but she allows herself to feel the sadness, to grieve, to lament. Whatever she's going through, this is her life, her experience, which she does not have to apologize for. And she flies. She flies and she is free. And this is what she says about love. Papa's love is like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It looks good, tastes good, smells good, and feels so, so good in my tummy tum-tum. Can we get a cake for her? This is a wonderful quote from Toni Morrison that I'm going to read to you. And this also helped to guide this project. And Toni Morrison, the great Toni Morrison, if you've never read anything by Toni Morrison, please do. She is one of your greatest American writers. She says the very serious function of racism is distraction. I want to emphasize that, distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, so you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists, usually European scientists, European American scientists, working on the fact that it is. Someone says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdoms, so you dredge that up. Actually, I should have said people of color who are scientists are trying to prove that their head isn't shaped properly. And then she says, none of that is necessary. There will always be one more thing. And I think that what I wanted Winnie to be free of is not having to prove her existence. She's already created out of love. She has nothing to prove to anybody. If people don't love her, that's their issue, not hers. If people can't handle her emotions, that's their issue, not hers, right? So she doesn't explain over again her reason for being. Her reason for being is enough because she was created in the image of God. She is fearfully and wonderfully made. She is an image bearer of God, period. how many of us could live in that liberation? Okay? Papa's love, as I said before, is as free as the wind. Oh, let me go back here. I want to say one more thing. I think there's a morbid fascination with equating black lives with suffering, and a curious, almost insatiable need from society that black people entertain the public. I wanted to create a character who was not pigeonholed in any of those ways of being. I wanted to create a character that had agency. Anybody that knows me knows I love to talk about agency. I love those kind characters who are so-called the minor characters who can teach us about agency, the despised, the hurting, the marginalized. They are not without agency. Some of us build our resumes on our suffering. And what I think what happens is that it gives us a distorted view of the experiences of the marginalized, the despised, the hurting. So it's very important for me to stress that, and that how she is able to break these ways of being that is often imposed upon us. Okay. So Papa's love is free as the wind. Are there enough colors or canvases or paintbrushes or crayons in the world to capture the presence of God? I think it was important for when I created this, and I'm going to talk about my beautiful team, is that we didn't have, you don't actually see God. There's not a physical image of God. God is not cute. God is not Scandinavian. Sorry, brothers and sisters, but I'm just going to put that out there. Okay, I know, but I'm going to say so. God is not anything that we tend to pigeonhole in. I wanted Winnie and others to be free enough to engage with a God that necessarily you don't see, but you experience. Or if you do see God, it can't be limited to one image. It cannot be limited to even to one theology, to be honest. Okay? So I wanted to convey that through a child's eye. And are there enough colors in the world to paint a picture of Papa? Okay, so I wanted to play the book trailer for you. I know that's one of my alarms right there. Okay, how do I do this? Okay. I'm gonna get chug up about it. So that video actually was created by a beloved friend of mine. I asked them not to go to such great lengths, but they didn't. They ignored me. And this person is a producer, was a former producer of Fraser. Those of you who are old school. And so it was one of those gifts that I couldn't have imagined. So why is nurturing emotional freedom with God so important to our understanding of love and reconciliation? This is a psalm. You keep tracks of all my sorrows, emphasis on all and plural sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. I love that because she is not required, or we are not required to collect our own tears. Nor is there a limit to those tears. You have recorded each one in your book. Whatever emotion we experience, acknowledging those experiences, those emotions is extremely important. So many have been hurt when they've been told they were wrong to feel what they feel. And I think it's very important that we give space to acknowledging what we are feeling, our emotions. So that was a powerful. And I came across this TED Talk. I don't know if anybody's seen this by Sir Ken Robinson. Has anybody seen this? Well, of course, Jay, you would, because you so love teaching. I want to read this for you. It's so powerful. And Drew, this is like, for us, our experience of pedagogy of the oppressed and some of the great wisdom that you came up with in our class. This speaks to that so much, okay? So my contention is, this is what he says, my contention is all kids have tremendous talents and we squander them pretty ruthlessly. I heard a great story recently, I love telling it, of a little girl who was in a drawing lesson. She was 6 and she was in the back drawing, and the teacher said this little girl hardly ever paid attention. And in this drawing lesson, she did. And the teacher was fascinated. She went over to her and she said, "What are you drawing?" And the girl said, "I am drawing a picture of God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And the girl said, "They will in a minute." That's my kind of girl. Okay? For real, okay? Speak your mind, no 6-year-old girl. Okay? Okay? Don't let authority silence your voice. Okay? And then he says this, kids will take a chance. If they don't know, they'll have a go. They're not frightened of being wrong. Now, I don't mean to say that being wrong is the same thing as being creative. What we do know is, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. I really want my students to hear this because I know that you live with a lot of fear. A lot of fear of being wrong, making mistakes. But I want you to know that if you believe in God the divine or not, wherever you are in your journey of life, try. There is such freedom in trying. By the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. We run our companies like this. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running, hear this well, national education systems where the mistakes are the worst thing you can make. The result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. If you think about it, the whole system of public education around the world is a protracted process of university entrance. And the consequence is that many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not. Because the thing they were good at in school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. I think we can't afford to go on that way. Picasso once said, Picasso's an artist, once said this. He said that all children are born artists. The problem is to remain an artist when we grow up. I believe this passionately that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it. We have to be careful now that we use this gift wisely, and the only way we'll do it is by seeing our creative capacities for the richness they are and seeing our children for the hope that they are. Our task is to educate their whole being so they can face this future. By the way, we may not see this future, but they will. Our job is to help them make something of it. So in pondering this, I just discovered this video. I've been pondering on this question: do our faith practices and learning about theology, quote unquote, kill how we can creatively engage with God? Do our practices and beliefs numb us to experiencing emotional freedom with God, the divine? We don't have to answer that now, but I think this is worthy of a conversation. Children as our teachers, I couldn't bring it up here, but I have a wonderful little girl girlfriend. She's Avery is 4, and Avery calls me Miss Kalalala. And Avery is inspiration for my book cover, because she is my nature girl. She will go around the hills of Berkeley and know she's not hippie, okay? And she will bury her nose in the flowers and breathe in deeply. Amazing she doesn't have allergies, okay? And she has all this pollen in her nose and she smiles, she's so happy. And her grandparents have a cabin in Yosemite, and I have a video, but it didn't come up, but I'm going to act it out for you as Tasma, I'm an actress. Drama queen. Okay, so it was snowing, and it was the first time she experienced snow. And her grandma said, "This is snow," and she goes, "Do you want your glass?" She went, "No." And she ran around and she had her arms up. She went, "Thank you, Jesus! Thank you, Jesus!" Nobody taught her that, but that was so liberating to see her. Just thank Jesus. And then she is so deeply moved by nature. So Yosemite, the part where her grandparents have a cabin, there was some form of disease, and they had to cut down a lot of the trees. And as they were driving towards where the cabin, Avery wept. She bawled. She lamented. And she felt so sad that the trees were no longer living. And her grandmother was amazing. She let her granddaughter cry. She did not belittle her tears. She cried for the death of the trees. And I thought, now she experiences emotional freedom. I have a 7-year-old Nicaraguan little boy that taught me that I had much to learn about love. He loves cookies. He did. And I would get him these big double pack of cookies, and his mom would put it on the fridge, and he would walk up, and he would, when she woke up in the morning, she would see him on a chair with chocolate all over his face, and he'd go, "What?" And so he never said no to cookies. So one day I bought some cookies for him, and I said, "Here you are," I'll tell you his name. "Here you are," and he went, "Too much." And I was like, too much. That was the 2 words, too much. And through prayer, counseling, I have to say, healing, I realized that I was loving too much. That my love was not being disciplined by God. And when I like discipline, I don't mean discipline like that. It wasn't cultivated by God. It was coming out of an impulse of wounds. It was a 7-year-old Nicaraguan little boy who said that I was loving too much, which would lead to me for burnout and all kinds of issues. So, sorry about the image, but this little boy, cooperation. He doesn't falter about holding the statue of a little rabbit who wants to get up on the platform. They're working together. He doesn't say, that rabbit doesn't look like me, I'm not going to help this rabbit. He doesn't say, this rabbit doesn't speak like me or share my culture, or we could go on, right? He just is ready to help. This is the question. When do we unlearn that? When do we begin to filter a kind of a selective process of who is worthy enough to be helped and not helped? Who is worthy to have compassion for and not have compassion for? This is another funny one. Dear God, I bet it's very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family and I could never do it. Can somebody give me a click? Because I am all real. All right. I don't even know if the child wrote this, but I'm claiming it. Okay? Connection with nature. This is a wonderful photo that really captures that connection with nature. Dear God, if we come back as something, please don't let me be Jennifer Horton because I hate her. Denise. Again, real emotion. For those of you who are into niceness, okay, this is going to be a stretch for you. But I don't know about you, but I don't like everybody. Okay, I really don't. Okay, so I love this poem by William Martin. Do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Such striving may seem admirable, but it is a way of foolishness. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life. Show them the joy of tasting tomatoes. Pray for me. Apples and pears. Show them how to cry when pets and people die. Show them the infinite pleasure in the touch of a hand, and make the ordinary come alive for them. The extraordinary will take care of itself. What's in a name? What's in a title? Like I said, Papa means something to Winnie. The whole idea of flying represents there's no boundaries of experience in this relationship. Can God be contained in one image? I talked about that. My team is a wonderful team that I work with, Wising Publication. They are co-owned by an African American woman and a white woman. I decided I didn't want to go corporate. I could have gotten this book published in a corporate way, but I didn't like how corporate was working, to be quite honest. I didn't feel honored and valued as an author. Academia has put certain standards of who is seen as a legitimate publisher or not. Apart from my promotion, there are certain things that I have to publish in certain journals. I am free of that. I think it's important. I think we can almost seduced into the notion that something that is worthy should only be channeled through a particular medium. And I didn't want to be published by a Christian author either. I wanted to be part of a staple of authors that came from all walks of life. So, and it was important for me to support a local company owned by women. And you're going to be hard-pressed in a corporate environment to see a woman in that environment, especially a black woman. So I wanted women to be, and to do this as a local thing. Gina Holiday is African-American. It was important for me to have a black woman create an image of a black girl. For us to speak for ourselves and not be appropriated, okay? So she is an amazing illustrator, and we work together. The irony of it is, my team are Christians. I didn't know that when I was walking in, so we prayed over everything. Everything was amazing. And so I just want to end with God as a winning and co-creator of artistic expression. And I'm gonna, and that kind of relationship is important in so many ways. And I'm hoping that I have my last piece here. Yes, thank you, Lord. Okay. I want to read. This kind of relationship with God is not confined to any age group. I actually believe this book is going to minister, heal, engage with all people of different backgrounds and ages. But I came across one of the Well, history will bear itself to say that Reverend Tracy Blackman is our modern day Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I've had the privilege of meeting her several times, Reverend Blackman, and she posted something yesterday which I thought was phenomenal. And I felt it captured the spirit of what I'm trying to do in this book, and how there are those who live this kind of free emotional relationship with God. And this is what she says, and this is how I'll end, and we have Q&A. Today, I am praying against the spirit of competitiveness that might cause you to measure the value of your journey by the steps of someone else. I am praying for a restoration of confidence, the kind we are born with before anyone ever tells us we can't. I am praying for the silencing of every internal voice of self-doubt. I am praying for corrected vision that reframes every obstacle as an opportunity, every hater as a helpmate, every disappointment as a redirection, every closed door as a course direction, and every enemy as another reason to excel. I am praying for deliverance from the low places, deliverance from low self-esteem, low living, low loving, and low expectations. I am praying that you decide today to stop giving yourself away. Today I pray you gather up the courage to reach for the sky, because you are one of God's brightest stars and the sky is where you belong. Let's not give ourselves away to just anyone. Let's encourage each other to feel. Let's not succumb to the notion that being stoic and being emotionally disassociated is freedom. Amen. So Q&A.
When did you first start writing the book?
2 years ago. It went through several drafts to get to this point. But yeah, no, so, and I have to big up some people. Anthony Baggy, stand up. One of the few young adults I will actually call my friend. He's my friend. He is my co-partner in creativity. We have such a beautiful rhythm of friendship and partnership. He's seen every draft of this piece, every single one. So he's seen it evolve. So it's a great history recorded for me. And I'm deeply blessed to have you in my life, Anthony. There's a couple other people, to your question, that have shaped this. Drew Rachbit was really instrumental in helping me to see the world in a different way. When he looked at Winnie, he was one of the first people that I showed Winnie to. He noticed that Winnie wore a bracelet, and he just traced it with his hands. There's a beautiful way how Drew looks at the world. And Drew said, you know, he goes, I like Winnie. He liked her. And he said, you know, you see so many when you see black kids in like books, he said they're wearing an African cloth that doesn't exist. It's usually made up, it's not real. And I thought that was hilarious, personally. But that's the way how Drew works. It was important to me. Drew is a truth teller. If he didn't feel like it was truthful, he would tell me. Anybody that knows Drew knows this. So he was a good filter for me. There were many others. Susie, where she gone? So Susie was one person, and I have friends around the country who really engaged. Dr. Luther E. Smith Jr., those of you who got to hear him speak, and Professor Helen Broom, Pearson Smith, are both endorsers of the book. And a really exciting thing that's just happened, Addie Zierman, who wrote When We Were on Fire, has written a blurb for this book. So, yeah. Any others? Yes? Sorry? I don't, sorry, yeah. It comes out, the actual hard copy comes out in August. We are close. This is my other girl right here, Jamie, who will, my website will be ready by Monday. So email me and you can access the information there, okay? All right, yes?
It's probably another session, but how can we as a community cultivate some of the themes in here? So as far as listening well to one another, as far as loving each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so actually, Jay came to my class to give a sense of what students needed and their responses. And I actually afterwards did a lot of prayer around how I can make the engagement with scripture more creative. And I had gone on a training program in Malibu. I know it's hard, but somebody has to do it. and I came across a wonderful way of reflection that is a pictorial version of Lectio Divina. And so what I had students do was either, I gave them pictures, artistic impressions of particular biblical stories, and had them respond using the Lectio Divina system. The students were quiet. You could hear a pin drop for 90 minutes. And when I said, do you want me to break it? They were like, no. And this was incredibly important for them. It's been, so that creative part of how do you engage, it doesn't, for those of you who are very left-brain oriented and like, but there's the word. I'm not saying that you're not doing your exegesis, your hermeneutics, and all of that. Historical, all of that is important. I'm not saying that we throw the baby out the bathwater, but that was very interesting to me, and the conversations became very rich. One of my students said, she focused on the word friend when we looked at the healing of the paralytic, and she said, you know, when I talk to my friends, I don't self-edit. I'm using my words and hers, but it never occurred to me to talk to God as a friend. Now, some people might think that intellectually that's dumbing things down. I don't know. The Psalms are rich with this stuff. So that is another conversation, though, I think. Yeah. Others? Yes, Sarah.
What are some things that you've learned about yourself through this process as a creator and stuff like that?
Yeah, and Sarah is also a queen and definitely one of my people in my corner, my team. She's my TA. I think, well, for me, I experience a freedom from what I think are some of the constraints of academia, of what's worthy to be published and what is not. I really don't care. And it really was because of this process. I feel free. And I was like, and I had to do a Kickstarter campaign, which was really not easy for me. And I said to God, can I please do it a different way? And God said, no. And I was like, for real? I mean, we had some debates, okay? And it was hard, and pride came up, Sarah, and insecurities, and thinking, what will they think? And I don't usually work that way. I didn't like the way that made me feel. And I thought, no, you know what? And oh my God, I met so many interesting people. I would have met Addie Zierman if I didn't do the Kickstarter campaign. She did a whole write-up and was like, wow. The people that I met, the conversations, and so I thought, don't let pride get in the way, because you don't think, well, why does it have to be that way? And so I feel very free to move in different circles. I could do the Oxford thing. I'm going in July. Thank you. So I can do that, but I want to be able to move outside. I don't want to be fixed to any kind of professional boundary, if you like. You know, which I must say, the roots of that come from great historical woundedness and elitism. So, is that helpful? Yeah, so that was one of the many things I learned. Anything else? Yes, Jay.
I'm curious what kind of parenting, what kind of teaching you think would keep that young Winnie alive as she grows older? What would it look like? What would it sound like?
And you know what? This is going to be part of a series, Jay.
Yeah, that's right.
And you have to have community. You can't do this by yourself. So community is going to be a big part of this series. And the kinds of things that we can talk about with God. So I've yet to be in a Sunday school that has a story that teaches how God interfaces with racism. I've never, so that is one book I'm writing. It's already written. The other is, it will illustrate the kinds of modeling that happens and the kinds of modeling that doesn't happen. I want her to experience all of that so she can be very real about the humanity that's around her and within herself as well. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Could God be a mama as well as
Of course,
a papa?
of course.
But you chose papa.
I chose Papa. That's my prerogative. Deal with it. But I'm a spiritual director. I am when you're a spiritual director, you have the immense privilege to encounter all kinds of manifestations of God that does not make sense. So if you want to call God Mama, you go right on ahead. This was prayed up. For me, calling it Wi-Fi Papa is that people have such a hurtful relationship with Father, the idea of Father God. And I sense that part of the calling was to transform that. To at least give people another portrayal of how you can relate to this particular impression of God. Done? Thank you so much for coming.